Welcome back. This is episode 5, the West Virginia chemical spill. On January 9th, 2014, another more modern day story, this time in Charleston, West Virginia. On that morning, approximately 300,000 people woke up to poisoned water, and you guessed it, not by a flood, not by accident, but by negligence. When they turned on their taps, what came out wasn't water. It smelled like black licorice, which is disgusting in my opinion. The candy itself, not that. That's obviously disgusting. It burned their skin and it carried a chemical that very few people had heard of. At this time, at least. The Elk River chemical spill was predictable. It was decades of industrial carelessness and weak regulations that led to a culture of corporations always came first, especially in West Virginia. West Virginia was like a sacrificial lamb for this. Um, and you have to know some of the history of the state itself to know that. For over a century, West Virginia has been America's sacrifice zone, if you will, for coal and chemicals. The state's economy was built off of resource extraction. So coal mines, chemical plants, a lot of heavy industry, and jobs there all depended on that ecosystem. So when the jobs disappeared, the tax money disappeared. So with the tax money being gone, the government looked for ways to save money, ways to cut out costs, running lean, skeleton crews. And the first thing they cut out was safety because they could do that and still get the job done. Um, they called Kanawha Valley the Chemical Valley of America because in this valley in West Virginia, factories dumped chemicals, pesticides, explosives, synthetic rubbers, fertilizer, solvents, everything into this river. But along with those products came obviously leaks, spills, explosions, and a bloody history of accidents in the area, even things that were not being done haphazardly. It was just a normal part of it. There was a lot of accidents and it was accident prone before they decided to cut safety out. So after years of this culture, by 2014, people in West Virginia had already lived through generations of industrial disasters, and the Elk River chemical spill was the latest in a long line of tragic events. But it by far affected the most. That's why it gets the most attention in the state. So the spill itself, just a mile and a half roughly upstream from the West Virginia American water intake, the main drinking water source for Charleston, sat a factory owned by Freedom Industries. And on January 9th, a storage tank at the facility leaked thousands of gallons of a chemical called MCHM 4 methylchloroxine menthol. Probably messed that word up. I say this every time, but if you want the exact pronunciation, do not rely on me. But it was used to wash coal and strip impurities off of it before they shipped it out. So, the tank it was in was poorly maintained, rusty, and overlooked for no meaningful reason besides to save money. So, they were checking boxes, saying, yep, it's good, on the check sheets for it for years to allow it to get to the point where all at once collapsed. So after it collapsed, it flowed straight into the river, which was only a mile and a half upstream from the intake that went to the entire city. So within hours, it was in taps and in thousands of people that didn't know this. The first thing they noticed, like I referenced already, was a strange licorice-like smell. It not only was in the water, but over a short period of time, it started to make every single building in the area smell like it. Homes, workplaces, offices, anything that wasn't very well ventilated. And even then, it started to get pretty bad. So naturally, people called. They called the water company, they called state agencies, and then after that is when the truth came out. It took a while. Granted, the situation moved really fast after the tank leaked, and it went straight into the river system. But the years of neglect is what led it to get there. Um, the governor issued a do not use order, not don't boil it or limit it, do not use it all for literally anything that you would use water for on a daily basis, which everybody I think severely neglects to realize how grateful you should be to be able to turn on your faucet and have water come out. Um, that's still relatively new in human history and is responsible for almost everything we do in the modern day in our home. To washing clothes, brushing your teeth, taking a shower, cleaning your dishes, everything. Staying hydrated, staying alive. You need water for everything. So imagine all at once 30,000 people, every single building in your approximate region cannot use water at all. And everybody's probably going to have to evacuate at that point or flood the stores. And that's only going to last so long. We learned that during COVID too. So stores were mobbed, bottles of water vanished within hours. The National Guard rolled in and they were handing out jugs of water. Schools went down, restaurants closed, and hospitals unfortunately, fortunately, they could stay functioning, but unfortunately, they were severely bottlenecked and struggled to function. Because on top of their already populated hospital with sick people in it originally, now they have a ton of people being ushered in for nausea, vomiting, being dizzy, skin rashes, the whole nine from drinking this contaminated water. So it just flooded it even more. And And at first, no one really knew how dangerous the chemical was because nothing like this has ever really happened. And another reason was MCHM, not going to try to say it again, had never been tested for human safety because why would it? There was no federal standard for it to be in drinking water. There was no toxicology reports on it at all, an LDL 50, anything. So there was no basic questions that could be answered at the time. The CDC, unsurprisingly, admitted they had almost no data on this, and that they eventually recommended that water was safe below 1 part per million. But that number was based off of nothing but a guess. So, for weeks, hundreds of thousands of people lived in fear. Even after the ban was lifted, many refused to trust their taps. I wouldn't either. Mothers would bathe their babies in bottled water, and families spent savings buying jugs just to cook dinner because you're trapped. So, the cover up here is Freedom Industries declared bankruptcy within days of the spill, which is a pretty classic move, bankruptcy, or you get sold out to some other company, um, so they could shield themselves from the lawsuit and walk away from responsibility. Although eventually the executives did face charges, but they were misdemeanors, probation, and light sentencing. So no one went to prison for long, and no one truly paid for poisoning 300,000 people. Because in West Virginia, this wasn't abnormal. It wasn't really shocking. Companies polluted their. It was a generational thing at that point. People suffered regardless, and regulations were kind of shrugged off. Life went on. They. It wasn't new to them. The Elk River spill forced the nation to briefly look at West Virginia. It raised questions about chemical storage and the laws surrounding that and about water safety. Congress held hearings about it. The state passed some reforms, but within a few years, pressure from the industry rolled almost all of them back. Pressure to pass the reforms was a lot louder and more circulated than rolling them back, and it happened more slowly. So today, the same risk remains for the same residents in the same areas because of aging tanks and the river line, aging infrastructure, aging pipes, weak oversight. It still dominates everything. And the people there live in the shadow of industries that treat their health as expendable, which is very unfortunate. West Virginia is like America's sacrificial lamb. The Elk River chemical spill wasn't an isolated event, it was the product of a system where one corroded tank was enough to paralyze an entire city. A system where corporations will continue to make the active decision to poison you and just walk away, and a system where ordinary people have to pay the price of it every single day. And it proves something again. In modern America, your water supply can vanish in a single night. It can go from fine to poisonous and going to kill you in a single night. And it's not from war, it's from negligence, from people that just do not care and do not do what they are asked to do, and more often than not, elected to do, which is keep the citizens that elected them safe, not the corporations that are walking away from their decision to not do so safe. So I hope you like that, guys. That one I honestly didn't have a lot about. So if anybody knows the story better than I do, please comment something. You'll be able to teach me something. Next time, we'll look at the story of vinyl chloride, which is something else that I never really gave any thought until I started doing these episodes. Thanks again, guys. I look forward to seeing you there.